Well, I'm from Southern California, and my mother was taking art classes from an artist named Richard Peterson. And so he ended up moving down here in probably 1977. No, excuse me, 1974 or 75 to go to the Instituto. He was getting his MBA, I think, and then also doing lithography at the Instituto. So I had decided to take a long extended trip to Mexico in the beginning of 76. So he happened to be up in Camarillo at Christmas time, and my mother introduced me to him, and then he told me, I'm going back to San Miguel de Allende, which I had heard about from him and my mother, and so you have to look me up. So I decided, I left in the beginning of January of 76, first went to Puerto Vallarta for a few days, well, for about 2 weeks, and then I took the bus up to Guadalajara, and then from there I caught the second class bus, La Alteña, from Guadalajara to San Miguel. I didn't realize one of the differences between first and second class is that second class makes a lot more stops. So it must have taken about 10 hours to get to San Miguel. We went all the way through San Felipe, Dolores Hidalgo, et cetera, So I finally got here around 8 in the night, where the buses stopped at the Plaza San Francisco, and across the street where they have churros now was the Café Colón. So I grabbed my bag, started walking down San Francisco, and past the Posada San Francisco, and it looked a little too upscale for me at that time. So I walked down to the next corner, and there was a hotel called the Hotel Colonial. So I knocked on the door, got a room there, and the room they gave me was actually where Ruth Lescud finally got her little attico, but that was my first room in San Miguel. Mm-hmm. So the next morning I went to the Instituto to find Richard Peterson, and he asked me where I was staying, and he said, oh, that's really expensive. He said, there's a little hotel called Posada La Fuente, and there's a little restaurant on the side included, Mama Mía. So I went there the next day, and the rooms were only $3. So I moved in, and that was room number 4, I think. And at that time, well, it belonged to Jose and Berta Luna, but they were in California visiting Jose's mother. So Annabella Martinez was managing it for them in their absence. So when I checked in, Richard Peterson took me there, and we were sitting outside, and in room number 3 was Annabella Martinez. So she came, we started talking, had some tequilas, and it was the beginning of a big chapter of my life. At that time, San Miguel was very small, and I ended up staying here for about 5 months. And just enjoying the small town, going to the Cucaracha, the La Princesa, the whole life of the small town, going all around the beautiful areas, the balnearios. I had never been to Europe, so I had never seen a city like a colonial town with the architecture and the cobblestone streets, so it was really exciting for me. And because of that, I ended up meeting a lot of people. There was Don Clay, Sidel Schooler, and family. All of a sudden, there was a small community that was wonderful, that you would go down a street, you'd always see them, and people seemed to think, oh, you want to stop for a drink, you want to have lunch? And so it was just, I had come from a very routine life, and all of a sudden, it was a whole different world, so I really fell in love with San Miguel. And then I went back to San Francisco. The next year I came back again. In the meantime, I had met Jose and Berta when they came back from California, and we all became very good friends. So the next time I came back in 77, I stayed here for about maybe a month. And it was wonderful because I knew all these people already and my way around. And then I did several other coming back and forth. And eventually, in 1983, after a long trip abroad, I came down here, and I thought this would be a wonderful place to live. So I had some money saved up. It was right after Thanksgiving in '83, and I talked to Jose and Berta Luna and asked them if there was any way that I might be able to live down here. I told him I had some money to invest. And he said, well, you know, we have a partner who owns 20% of Mama Mía, but he's never here. He said I could call him. He lives in Mexico City, and maybe he would be interested in selling his shares. So I got my hopes up. When I got back to San Francisco, about a few weeks later, he called me, and he said, well, our partner is willing to sell 20% of the restaurant for $20,000, which is exactly the amount that I had in the bank. And so I thought, great. So I thought, well, how do I get the money down there?
Because he wanted cash, right?
Yeah, he wanted cash, yes. And so it was after, it was in the beginning of February, went to the bank and told them I wanted to take out $20,000. And they said, well, you have to come back here after we close. So they gave it to me all in 100s. And I was going to fly with the money to Puerto Vallarta, was going to meet Jose and Berta, give them the cash, and then we were going to come to San Miguel. So of course I was very nervous about that, but I got some Ziploc bags, a pair of boots, put $5,000 in each bag, put them on either side of my calves, got on the plane, and I guess I wasn't sweating bullets because I passed through immigration and everything. Jose and Berta were waiting for me at the airport. I gave them the money. It was like, okay. So then we came to San Miguel and we did the paperwork that made it official with the lawyer Cesar Hoyos, who lived near Bellas Artes at that time. And so I became a partner, and I was able to, it was a wonderful beginning of a new life.
Yeah. So at that point, Mama Mía was it was one room, right?
Well, by the time I had bought into it, the restaurant part wasn't just the first door into the left-hand side, which is where it began.
And this is the original location on Umara.
Yes, and which is now, what it was Bar Dario for a while, now it's different. But anyhow, when you go in, they had started serving food in the patio, and the kitchen had moved to the back, that whole flat part in the back. And it was no longer a hotel. And they had already began Mama's Bar, and they started knocking walls to make it, expanding it. So the bar was there. The coffee service area was at the far corner of the, right where the kitchen is, which eventually changed to the one with the patio, where the patio is.
But when Jose started, it was basically one very small room, correct?
Yes, yes. And that was in 1975, because that's when they started it. And I didn't get there until February of '76.
And there was a lot of live music even from the beginning, right? Because Jose would sing and play guitar.
He would play guitar in that room, and then also there was a wonderful singer, I forget his name now, Oscar. Anyhow, he had a wonderful voice, and he sang, Jose would sing, but it was very small. There were maybe only about 4 or 5 tables in there.
And so it grew little by little.
Yes, kind of organically as the need, then they expanded a little place, another place. And by the time I bought into, so at that time, Mama's Bar, when I first got there, wasn't really full steam ahead, but it became a big center where people would meet.
Because that point, I know even when I got here for the very first time in the late 80s, it was the center point of San Miguel socially.
Yes.
Everybody was there.
Right.
You could find all your friends at any point of the day or night.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about what it was like working there at that point when you got to town.
Well, in what sense?
Well, just what was your daily life like? Because again, it was the focal point of so many people.
Well, it was mostly checking to make sure that everything was being done that should have been done. Even aesthetic things like changing light bulbs, or a lot of people would be certain tables where certain groups of friends would meet, and you would just hang out there. And it was way before laptops and all that, so there was really conversation. Nobody was looking at their phones or anything like that. And then in the evening, of course, it changed to the nightlife. There was live music in the patio, there was music in the bar, and then the night watchman, Don Chucho, was just an amazing man who had a big mustache, big hat. He was formidable and a really wonderful person, and he took care of any problems that might occur, but in a very nice way. And then there was Doña Toña, who was the hostess, who everybody knew, and we called her La Tia, the aunt, and she was just a really special part of Mama Mia's. Really gave it a lot of soul. And then there was, eventually you could get food to take out, and the bar on the left, which was originally the little restaurant, we made that into a bar called Bar Leonardo, and we started showing movies there. And you could get popcorn and a cocktail for I forget how much, and so we did that. And then it became a bar, I don't know what year that was, maybe in 1990 or so, it became a really proper bar that was called Bar Leonardo, with paintings on the walls of Leonardo da Vinci's sketches. And it was a U-shaped bar, so you could sit at one place and look across and see other people. You could look out the windows and see people walking up and down Umaran. And so there was a wonderful combination of people, Americans, Mexicans, young people, old people, three generations of people. There was something for everybody, so it was really a wonderful spot.
Now, back before all this started, when you originally came in the 70s, what drew you to San Miguel? What made you want to stay here?
Well, I guess it's just the charm. I had never seen a town like this, a Spanish colonial town. I had mostly been to the beaches. And it was just such a different place. There was a certain magic to it that it was easy to get to know people, and you would just walk down the street, whatever, if you were going to get something at the pharmacy or to the Casa Cohen at the hardware store. The people who own these businesses and the clients just had a wonderful relationship. Like Don Pedro, when you would go to Don Pedro hardware store, which is right on the corner of what they call the Flatiron building, that was the original Don Pedro. And there was just a familiarity. There was no really class distinction. It was just a very small town in a different country and culture, and the mariachis, the music, everything was just wonderful. And the high desert, the balnearios, it was great. It still is great, but at that time it was a lot smaller. Mm-hmm. When I first came here, and several years after I had moved here, the whole Jardín area was completely different. Because where Banamex is, it was La Cucaracha, which is a famous bar. On the other corner was El Colibri, where Jerry and Carmen had the bookstore and art store. And then on the corner where La Coronela is, it was La Princesa. Before, and then where the Hotel Morada, it was the Hotel Patio. And they had a little bar there. And if you went down Relo, around Casa Cohen, there was a wonderful little bar called La Perla. And so there was a lot very close to the center, and there was a lot of activity, and it wasn't closed off, so that the taxis would just wait all around the Jardín. And then in the Portales, they had all these stands where you could buy chiclets and you could buy cigarettes, and until they got rid of those. So it was and also one thing I loved was on the day of the Candelaria, February the 2nd, it was like magic because they didn't have it in the park. They would bring all these plants in the night, and when you came down in the morning, the whole plaza was covered with flowering plants, green plants. Little kids would come in with a wheelbarrow and ask you if they wanted you to pick up the plants and take them to your house or something like that. And that went on maybe for about 2 or 3 days, and then eventually they moved it to the park. But it was just really magical how it used to happen. And I used to buy a lot of plants there. And you'd always, the longer you were here, you would meet more people. And still now, I walk down the street, and because of the restaurant, I got to know a lot of the waiters, and the chefs, and all sorts of people. When I went to swim at the Malanquin, I met a whole bunch of people, so it helped me improve my Spanish, where I became fluent. And there was you could just go around a corner and you'd see somebody that you knew, and it was a wonderful little community,
And at that time, if you remember too, were all the food stalls at night in the Portales.
Yes, the famous hamburgers and the hot dogs wrapped in bacon. That on your way to another bar, you would stop and get them and hope that the alcohol would kill anything that you might get, or cut through the grease.
There's like the enchiladas del portal.
Yes.
They come from the portales, which are local enchilada with potatoes and carrots.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be Mama Mía.
Yes.
And then hamburgers or enchiladas.
Right. Uh-huh. And then for the, I don't know if you'd call it upscale, but there was La Fragua, and that was a big place, probably for the happy hour. A lot of people went to the La Fragua for happy hour. And they actually had a nice restaurant on the side. And one dish I always remembered was a shrimp curry that was served in a half pineapple that had been scooped out.
Oh, that was a famous dish.
Yes,
I remember that.
it was wonderful. And then, of course, a really good restaurant was at the Hotel of Sierra Nevada. And you would go into the bar area, the lounge. They would bring you the menu. You'd have a cocktail or two, and then they would take you to your table. You would order from the menu, and then when your table was ready, they'd take you there. The waiters had, black pants, white shirts, white jackets, ties. I mean, but it wasn't snobbish. I mean, you got to know them all. They would call you by your first name. And now, when I walk down the street, I'll see different people. And Roberto, where have you been? And it's just wonderful, fun memories. It's really great. And it was a nice little community. We all knew each other and their children. And when people would get married, they would invite you to the children's weddings and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
But eventually you did leave San Miguel, and you visit regularly, but you no longer live here.
Well, I sold my share of Mama Mia in 1997, so I was a partner from 84 until 97. To me, it was, I wanted to spend more time in California because that's where I grew up. We grew up on a ranch, a lot of family. I wanted to see my nieces and nephews and great nieces and nephews growing up. And so it ended up that I ended up selling I would stay at my house twice a year and go back to Santa Barbara. And when I would come back, I eventually decided to sell the house and then just rent a house. And then come down 1 month a year to visit all my friends. And that's why I come down, because San Miguel is a beautiful town, but to me the most important part are the wonderful friends I have. Like you.